just labeled it. I think I did it.
All right, you
Okay.
already got it.
All
So
right. There you go.
this is a this is a, Sunday afternoon call with Mason, with some intelligence that he can share with us. That's just intended for life and to expound our minds and our thinking. He had some pretty good topics yesterday afternoon, and we needed to just be able to grow as a group, and he wanted uh, to give people courage to walk the walk and begin to expand their courage and minds. So, with that, Michael, you have the floor.
Okay, low tide.
Thank you.
Uh, this call is pretty much about hardball, and I only use that term because most people realize that that's the top league, the pros, and if you don't have it, you're not going to play on the team. So I've been prompted to get into some stuff that most people have some little piece of a problem with, and it's called uh, the race divisions between people, and who they think has the rights and who doesn't, and what they should change in their life to be like somebody else, and there's just a whole plethora of crazy stuff that goes along with this. But the main part that I want to get into to start with is, I had some very early in my life issues with the black people. And, most people, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I wasn't even in school yet, hardly. And I used to go down to the playground with my mom, and I'd go and get on the swings and stuff. And I used to have this one little black kid, and he'd come over and he'd just want to pester me. And to what degree, it's irrelevant. But the point is that, I was developing this interesting negative attitude about black kids. And, I didn't like what was going on, and my mom didn't like what was going on, and the little kid's mom didn't care what was going on. And so, we were living down in Southgate at the time, and that's where it began to become more and more black in that area. And so I was being literally inundated with black people. And so finally, uh, after I think I was about 7, my dad, he said, we're getting out of here. We're going to white man town. And I'm like, well, okay. So we moved over to Glendale. Now, just for your own information, Glendale, this was during the Civil Rights Act. Some crazy things happened there in the 60s. But if you weren't white, you couldn't live there, and you couldn't be there after dark. And that was on the the city's own charter. They just said, if you're not white, you can't be here. And so I grew up in this environment. And the funny thing is I didn't see any change. So anyway, I got into high school, and
Mason,
all this
yeah,
stuff happened. Yes, yes.
we lost you for just about 30 seconds, but it's all back now.
Okay. Well, that was another call came in, and I clicked it off, but I guess it
Yeah,
stopped this call. Sorry about that.
it just muted you. It's okay.
That's all right. So, did I tell you about Glendale?
Yeah, that's where you were at.
Okay. Well, anyway, I got into high school, and I think it was my first grade, the first year in high school, and all of a sudden, all the Civil Rights Act hit that particular area, and we had a black family that was at gunpoint allowed to move in to Glendale and take up residency there, and they had a boy who was uh, high school grade, and he was introduced to the high school where I was at, and but they had a guard on him all the time, all the whole time he was there. And this went on for a while, and I never made any personal acquaintance with the gentleman, but I mean, so what? Um, he wasn't doing anything to anybody, but he was just the wrong color, and according to Glendale. So they finally um, they pulled him out of the school he was in, he was going to, and so I was then I went in. I had some bad times for myself. I learned the system from the back end, and I got thrown into a forestry training camp where you put out forest fires and stuff like that. But it wasn't a voluntary scenario. It was one of those court-ordered mandate things, and so I happened to rub shoulders with a whole bunch of different ethnic groups in there, and most of them were gang members and all. You can't believe all the stuff I had to deal with there, but I got along with all of them. And so I developed my own, just I'll say my natural abilities to deal with different people, different races and stuff. And it continued on up through when I went to work for Lockheed, and then I got to be a supervisor, and I got to be supervisor over all the different groups, black, white, yellow, red, all. And we all got along just fantastic, because for some reason those of us who didn't have issues with other races, got along just perfectly fine with all of them. And I didn't really have any issues with any of this stuff until I got involved with the government. And as a supervisor at Lockheed, I was supervisor almost 5 years. Uh, and at some point, they didn't like what I was doing. I got the DOD laid me off with no cause. They couldn't tell me why they were laying me off. I knew why, but they wouldn't tell me why. So one day, um, oh, I was dealing with some very interesting issues with the system of fighting the IRS, and I'd read a ton of law by that time, and so all of a sudden one day a very close friend of mine, he came over and he said, "Hey man," he said, "there's a case here you need to read." And I said, "Oh, okay." Well, it was the Dred Scott versus Sanford case, and for those that don't have an idea about this case is still on the books. It's never been overturned. It's never been amended or some any way changed as far as its principles and the history that it relied on for the ruling in the case. It ruled against the black people of having any rights in this country, period. And I read that case and I went, oh my God, here I am. Not only am I dealing with the system and all of its corrupt nature, but now I got to look at some of my friends who are black, and they're not even on the same footing anywhere close to where the white people were when they came here, and yet all of a sudden I'm finding myself I'm in the same boat with them. We're all in the same soup here. So as I began to do my walk and got more and more involved in the actual principles of life on this planet, because I got hooked up with a spiritual group I mentioned before, and began to do my exercises and ask questions, and then that's when I was walking into the hallowed halls of lizard land, and began to get my own awakenings. And that's where I began to find out who I might have been, where I might have come from, what previous lifetimes I had experienced already, and a whole lot of stuff that was involved with this simple little step I once took to find out who I really was in this system and on the planet, in this universe. That sounds like a crazy thing to come to realize. I'll tell you what, it wasn't funny when it happened, but I'll tell you what, it changed my general idea and attitude about everything I'd already learned and already knew. And the biggest challenge I had at that point is, how in the world is the universe going to get all these different ethnic groups to come together at some point? And it was like, well, just keep moving and don't worry, there'll be an avenue at some point. And I was told this more than once. So I went about my process. I learned all the rights and the privileges and the immunities, and then I learned who aliens were and who had rights to do what and how it all came together. And finally, about 3 or 4 days ago, before I talked to Mr. Lotide, um, I got this really heavy impression because I talked to somebody who was also a black lady, close to Salty, and we had a really good talk, but it never crossed into the area of, would you be willing to take the knowledge that you have gained and maybe gaining by being in this country at this time, and all of the things that were offered to the white people here? would you be willing to take all that and go home for a while and help the people in your group? And I only make this comment. This is not, I'm not trying to get anybody to leave the country or go home. The whole idea here is, and I had a really good talk with my postal man just the other day, leading up to this very talk. And I told him he's Puerto Rican. I said, "Hey man, where's your home?" He said, "Oh, Puerto Rico." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I've moved here, and there's a bunch of crazy things with the government and the system and all that crap, and it caused me to move over here and take up, residency or whatever." And I said, "So your home is Puerto Rico?" "Yeah." He said, "I'm Puerto Rican." I said, "What would you think about learning the principles of life in your world and in the universe and all of the things that we have acquired in this country because of that revolution, whether it was legitimate, whether it was phony, fraudulent, I don't care what it was. The white people came to a point in their lives where they had finally been tired enough to say no. And now is the biggest part because the white people and all these other ethnic groups who've been brought in here, not not because of they were invited, they were paid to come here. And they came here for one purpose, to break up and destroy the unity between people specific. So if you think this reptilian group had anything in its idea about bringing all these other groups here to give them some kind of a sovereignty, uh, quite completely 100% backwards. Their whole idea was not only to not bring people here to take part in our sovereignty, but to destroy what little sovereignty that was visible here. They were only entitled to a particular group. And the European people, they came here with the idea of getting away from a monarchy, the lizards. Guess what they did? They brought them with them. And so here we are now, all the different groups, black, yellow, red, white, brown. And what's going on? Are we still being forced into a division by getting into all kinds of arguments and discussions about who doesn't have this right and who doesn't have that right? And I told my mailman, I said, "Buddy, I'm going to tell you something. Uh, who would be more welcomed in your country than you to teach people down there what they have a right to in life and be willing to stand up to whatever kind of tyranny is going on down there?" And I don't know what that might be, but I'll tell you what, from what I've been hearing around the globe and how far that demonic child trafficking and all the other crap that's been going on in this world system for the last who knows how many 100 years, I said, I know your country is just as dirty in the inside as ours is. And so we're all being brought together at a time right now. It's very, very, very important. And it isn't about what you want to do. It isn't what you like. It's about what are you willing to do to help the universe, to help your people, if you happen to have a group specific, to raise themselves up to a point where they're ready to stand up to a corrupt system that they've all become involved with. And it doesn't necessarily mean you got to go home, but where can you? I can't think of a better place for you to go. And there's an interesting element to all this. And I get all kinds of backdoor stuff from people about, oh, I can't leave here. I want my rights here. I want my money here. Well, you know what? The funny thing about that, uh, if you went home and you got your people sovereign, you taught them how to become sovereign. You got part of this global financial system, this quantum system that's supposedly coming, and the SARA, and everybody's got money, and they're all having. Now, what are they going to do with all this money? Are they just going to go buy a boat and a hot rod and have fun? Or are they going to get involved in cleaning up this planet, planting forests, bringing home gardening back into the scene? Get rid of all these big commercial entities that are only interested in one thing: how much money they can steal from you, and how much they poison you. All that's going bye-bye. It's all going bye-bye. But who better to help black people in Africa to learn this than from somebody who came from this country, who learned it and took it to them in their country? How else are they going to get it? And who are they going to be looking at as some kind of credible authority about the principles that I'm giving everybody right now? So, and like I said, I'm not telling anybody they got to leave, they got to go home, but you may be find yourself in a situation where it's time for you to step up, wake up, challenge the very system that all the white people brought with them, and everybody now is finding them all themselves in the same soup, and everybody's looking around wondering, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I said, well, go look in the mirror and see what you need to do, and then know how to ask the question. That's where all these frequencies things we've talked about more than once. So my whole point to this little exercise has got nothing to do with division. It's got to do with the planet and all of its people coming together under the same conditions. Everybody's sovereign, but you're going to be sovereign in your own house to start with. Now, here's a funny part, because I know some people that are definitely semi-racist, and my comment to those people is that, can you imagine you going home, getting your people awake, helping them understand what the nature of privacy is all about, and about how you have the allodium and the underlying unalienable principles that God gave all of us, and all of a sudden you find yourself, gee, I think I'd like to go back to the U.S., for instance, or back to one of the states, as it would be appropriate, and you pick up the phone and you call somebody, uh, somebody that has some kind of a connection here, and say, hey, buddy, I got, oh, by the way, I got my sovereignty down here in my country, and I think I qualify for diplomatic immunity now. And I'm like, hey, man, that's fantastic. So you don't have to ask permission. You can go to the gate, get on the plane you want to fly on, and fly where you want to go, and you're exempt, immune, unless you didn't watch any of those movies about the criminals who had diplomatic ID. They were killing people and getting away with it. Well, what do you think is going to happen when everybody's got a whole different mindset? They're all interested in doing what's best for the universe, and they don't mind traveling around the world wherever they might have an inkling to go and passing this little bit of information on. And if you want to set up a place here in this country in one of the states for your living quarters for whatever, hey man, you got diplomatic immunity, remember? And we're going to have diplomats here all over the place, because this is where this thing starts from. This is the country. It was set up just for this. Can't help it because the lizards managed to get the upper hand and put everybody to sleep. So, but now's the time. Now's the wake-up time. And as I've talked more than once about these topics, it's time to step up to this criminal system and stand your ground and get us all in a position where your sheriff, your Secretary of State, hey guys, we got some important issues that you need to address. The sheriff especially, your number one duty is to protect the life, liberty, and property of the citizens of your county in your state. That's your job. Your boundary lines is that county line. Now, does that mean you can't cross it? No. If you're called for help, and if somebody else needs your assistance to help learn something about something that they need to learn, like sheriff next door, I don't care. But once the people start standing up in all these different venues, like the court system, for one, and you don't even have to walk in there. You can just send them notice. Take an instrument that you're already focused on, like your mortgage payment. You want to give your mortgage company a notice of impending criminal charges against them for extortion, money laundering, counterfeiting. Oh boy, you got some really good stuff that we can cram down these people's throat who also need to wake up. And this whole thing's going to happen. It's happening as we speak. It's just that there's very few people that I know of personally that have taken steps that I'm telling you to help open up their own spiritual eye and be able to walk where there's no light. And I was prompted to give all you guys just one little piece. There's a young lady that I've heard on YouTube in different places, different things. I don't listen to her much at this time, but I wanted to tell you this this story that she told, and I know it was true because I get goosebumps every time I tell it. She uh, she lived in northern America, and with an indigenous tribe, and a shaman took her under her wing when she was very young. Took her under his wing, and one day she got to a certain age, and he said, "Well," he says, "you need to take a step in a different direction than what we've been going." She says, I want you to look at yourself and ask yourself one question. What is the one thing? I know everybody's got one thing that you're the most afraid of in life. Now, some people may just say death. Well, you're only afraid because you don't know anything about it. Well, that's maybe true. And have you got something that's more personal in your present day existence that you just can't seem to handle or deal with? And she said, yeah. She says, I'm really afraid of the dark. Well, that's kind of like death, isn't it? Uh, and so he says, okay. Yeah, he didn't say any more about it. They went about their stuff, and a little while longer goes by. He says, okay, I think it's time for us to deal with that thing you're having a problem with. So he took her out along this cliffside in the middle of a real rugged area, and she'd been there many times before. And there was just call it a mountain path that ran along the side of the mountain. Uh, the only difficult part of it, it wasn't very wide, and if you weren't careful, you could literally tumble off that cliff and you wouldn't survive the fall. So he took her out there, and it was in a special night, and it was dark. And I mean, it wasn't just dark, it was black dark. And he had a little light with him, just standing there on the edge of this trail that she'd walked many times before. And he said, okay. He said, this is your opportunity. He said, I'm going to take my light and I'm going to meet you on the other side of the trail. And she's standing there looking at him. So he turned around, walked off into the dark, and she's standing there in the dark. She couldn't see her hand in front of her face. And she stood there a little bit, and then something just kind of came over her in that moment, that she just had to put her foot on that trail and start to walk. Now, can you imagine what happened in that moment when she put her foot on the trail? Lights went on. It was like she was standing in a full-blown uh, football arena with all the lights shining on her and the trail. She started walking, and she walked all the way across the trail, got the other side, and he was standing there waiting for her. And she stepped off the trail onto the little knoll where he was standing waiting, and he's going, wow. He said, look at there. And she said, I could have never imagined in my wildest nightmares or dreams that this would have been possible. So if you think this walk is easy, uh, yeah, it's only about taking the first step, which is not only the easiest of all the steps you're going to take, but it's also the safest. You just can't see it. And that little part of you inside that just cannot, oh my God, I got to go talk to the sheriff. Yeah, he's going to eat you. Oh God, oh no. But see, the interesting part about all these little pieces of our system right now, and I've made these comments before, is that there's a remedy in their face for everything we have the right to demand. Every single one. There's nothing in our life, as long as you're in a private side, you're protected from one end of this country to the other, and in everything you do. Private. The minute you damage someone else's life, liberty, or property, now you're going to answer to not only God, but maybe even to the system that's not taken too kindly with you damaging other people's property and walking away from it. But that's between you and the universe and the people you damage. And you'll learn the lesson sooner or later. But what you're going to find out is that as you go through this walk, all of those little things that most people have difficulties with, you're no longer having them. You're not dealing with that stuff anymore. It's just not in your space. And no matter what you're doing in your life, you find yourself having an advantage over the things that you may have tried like that before, and all of a sudden it's not a problem. So this is not just a growing process. This is an advantage that everybody has access to. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you're living. I don't care where you think you have a right to be. I don't give none of that's all of that's irrelevant for you taking that first step. That's the key. And once you do, the universe is going to be standing right there, looking right back at you. Yeah, was that so hard? Yeah, well, I got another step for you. Is this one going to be scarier? Um, I don't know how it could be. Well, you won't know. There's just a lot of steps out there, and every one of us can take either one or all of them. It's up to you. How far up this ladder you think you want to go during this time? And I'm not saying this time is a forever time, but it comes and goes, just like your experiences in life. So I don't know how much more I can give you guys with respect to your spiritual strengths, your awareness, your inner power, the things that you were given with that spark that you came from. But I tell you what, as this particular time that we're in right now begins to progress, there's going to be so many things that were here before in a previous golden age that you're going to get access to again in this golden age. And the guides, the masters that are watching over all this, have been through all this who knows how many times. They relish in the awakening of every soul that comes to the light. So I guess low tide, unless you or any of your cohorts over there who might be listening got any questions, I'll be more than happy to entertain them.
Well, open the floor to questions if anybody has any. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. Just open your mic and ask away. And usually there's one or two questions that come in, and so we welcome them. Anybody? Don't be quiet.
Buck, 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 buck. Uh,
Uh,
I guess everybody saw that Santa Claus sitting on the back of a cruise boat with a beer in his hand.
no.
Yeah, all you people, you ain't getting shit unless you wake up.
Yeah, no. We've
Uh,
been laughing over the video that Salty shared with the chickens sitting on or
on
standing on.
top of the piano player,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's great.
That was a hoot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
guys.
anyone? Not even our jacks. They're
I'd,
just
li-
all mum.
I'd
Hey,
like to
this is
share something.
hardball.
There's Missy Okie. She's got one. That's a special.
I'd like to share something. It's
All right.
it's what you started out with, Mason, and when I was growing up, my grandma died in 1989. My grandma still sits on my shoulder, and you don't know how many times I look at my shoulder and say, "Yes, ma'am." When I was young, she had a friend over at her house, and you were talking about racism and the blacks and the whites and the 60s and et cetera, et cetera. When I was young, my grandma had a friend over and who happened to be black. And she took our arms and put them close to each other. And she said, "What's different?" Asking me, "What's different?" I said, "Well, her skin's darker than mine." "That's right. What else is different?" And I looked over and I said, "She's got freckles." "Oh, I've got freckles." "That's right."
Uh,
She picked up my skin and she said, "Oh my gosh, you have skin." She picked up her friend's arm skin and she says, "Oh, she's got skin." Her hand around my arm, "I've got bone. She's got bone." She said, "There's no different than the color of their skin. They are people just like you, period, with a mind, a love, and a heart." Now, fast forward, I went to school. I had dyslexia as a child. I went to school, to a college prep school, went into my first room, or went into my roommate. I was a boarder, went into my room. And this is during the Watts riot. She was from Watts. She was black. I was white. And she was aghast because I was a white lady, white girl. And I went through the same thing that my grandma did. And I said, there's only 3 of you in the school. We only had 300 students anyway. I said, there's only 3 of you in the school. It's okay. We're still friends today and laugh today.
How
My
about that?
customer base is probably 30% Black. I've got the Black Rodeo Association that I do a lot of work for. Those kids will come over here. I've got one that lives a mile from me, and since Charlie died, he checks on me all the time. And he said, "You ever have a problem, you call me, and we will be there." And it's the another friend also too, and just going on a little bit farther. Another friend, we always talk about racism and about just the different things that he's been through in his life. And he said, Sandy, he said, one thing I want you to do. He said, think of life from my perspective and what we go through. I never thought of that before. I just figured that we were all the same, but we're not. And I have never experienced the racism part that the other races other than myself go through. I've never thought about it that way. Think of what they go through. Um, we all have our trials and tribulations. Nobody's perfect. Anyway, I just want to share that.
Let me give you one little pearl that goes along with all of that. For those of us who know we've been here before, and we know we've been other ethnicities before, uh, everything that's going on right now, it's like a melding of all of your previous lifetimes into a situation where now you finally come to a point where you can release yourself. You got to forgive yourself for the things in your life. You can't. Nobody else going to forgive you. You got to do it. And all the things that you might have issues with that came up to this point in your life that are causing you to have negative feelings about someone or something, those are part of your history as well. And because we've all been here before and many, many times and under many, many of the same circumstances on the other side of the fence that a lot of people are going through right now, just remember this. At this particular time, the European people had attained something that no other race on this planet had attained to this point, and that was documents in their own life, in their system, that were mandates upon the system to protect and defend the private side of this system. And that means that there's a sovereign element here that exists in all people. It's just that this happened to be the one country on the planet that had the example to start with. Well, the people that were behind all this, that are being eliminated as we speak, their intent wasn't to bring the people up to a sovereign level in this country. Their whole intent was to destroy it. And they did that by infiltrating, changing all of the rules governing the legislation dealing with naturalizations and property titles and the whole bit, the taxing structure, the citizenship changes. That was what it was for. It was to break it up. It was to break up the unions that were abilities that had people had the ability to bring us together as a whole, not as one group. But they decided to break all that up. So you talk about the principle divide and conquer. That's what they did. So if you think that all of this intermarrying and all this other stuff that's licensed, controlled, taxed, and pretty much controlled in every way, shape, or form, it wasn't about bringing people together. It was about converting us all into their chattel, which is what they've done. Now it's our responsibility to reverse all that, because now we have the mindsets, the experiences from our previous lifetimes. If you want to get any answers on that, you know how to go about doing it. It doesn't happen overnight sometimes, but you never know unless you try. And so here we sit now, ready and willing, for the most part, to help people wake up and do something about this criminal system that all of us are having to deal with right now. And now is the time. I've said this so many times, it's amazing. Now is the time, because they're on the downside, we're on the upside. And no matter how terrible you might think that situation might be, well, Oh, I can't pay. I got to pay my mortgage. I got to get that license plate. I got to put that. Oh, okay, whatever. But you got to scare yourself a little bit in order to grow.
You know, Mason, as you talk about past lives, um, some, some people may not really be able to wrap their mind around exactly what does that mean. Some people call it past dream, intuition, deja vu, whatever. But if other people would share in their life, have you ever had something happen and then way past in years you experience it, or you have that feeling of being afraid of the dark and then how you overcame it? If you want to share those stories, it inspires everybody. I'll share mine. When I was a child, I think the biggest thing that ever happened to me, raised up in the top of Texas, which was I don't know if God started there or ended there, but it's a dry, barren, nothing area. Nothing. Nothing for miles and miles and miles and miles. When I was really small, my mother would tell me if I would take a nap, she'd give me a treat. I couldn't. I would be jumping on the bed and all over the place. And then I would tell her if I closed my eyes, I saw a real steep mountain and I would fly down like a bird. And I would go down these slopes and it was so gentle. And there was this water everywhere. Well, we know that's the ocean. But back then, television, the ocean, none of that. I didn't know any of that. But I knew what I knew what I knew. I could smell it. I saw it. I witnessed it. Years later, I kept telling my mother through adulthood, more and more and more about this vision. Okay, just whatever. She's daydreaming or something. But, I knew. Years later, I moved to Hawaii and I was drawn there. So I went to visit, ended up moving, went to work for a helicopter company, went up on the helicopter. The owner said he wanted to show me something, experience it with me. I said, okay. So we go up on the helicopter. We go over these mountains. I've been there. We went down. I was on a bird, right? So I'm floating like that bird that I told my mother about. Then there was all this water, which was the ocean right there in front of me. I sat on the sand. I could tell you the smell, the everything about this area. You can only get there if you hike in or take a helicopter. And the owner looked at me and said, they call this the Valley of the Lost Tribes, and they don't know what happened to the people. I was one of them. Apparently, he was too. We related, never talked about it again. Years, well, later, my mother came to visit. I kept telling her I got something special for you. Yeah. She saw this waterfall and she said, is that it? No. Is this it? No. Is this it? No. Went up on the helicopter, came back in tears, said that was it. How do you explain it? So, how many other people have experienced something that you can't explain it, but it's real? So, was it a past life? Was it deja vu? Whatever. So, has anybody else had those kind of experiences? I know Mason has.
Oh
Okay,
boy.
jump to the chicken song in a minute.
No, they're in the coop. I'm out in front.
Oh, how funny. But anyway, yeah, please share. And it's a small little group. There's just a few of us on here this morning or this afternoon. Share with us and get to know each other. And, you know, if you're afraid of speaking, this is a good time just to say hi.
Yeah, boo.
Yeah.
What about you, Low Tide or Jack? And Mason, you want to go more into things that's happened to you that you know from your experiences?
Well, I've lived more in my living years than most people have in many many lives, and I've been blessed in that notion. And it's very difficult for me to separate the stuff, but I know that the things that I've experienced are all real and true. and they're almost unbelievable to the people I share the stories with. I know that I know that I know that when I look upon the stars, I know that I'm destined to go to those places and seek them out, because I know that they're not there for no they're there for a purpose. I know that when I seek and look into the stars, that I have peace upon my heart, that I know that um, we are just at at like a stop along the journey, where we have to learn certain things, that we have to overcome our fears and become powerful in our own skin and our own mind, and comfortable um, to become able to fight the fight and fight a good fight, and have courage and faith that we can overcome all the obstacles that would stand upon in our way. And I uh, I don't like to reflect upon myself very much, but I do know that there's a lot in store for mankind as a whole. More specifically, a few of his chosen people, and there's great days ahead. I truly believe our greatest days are in our future and not behind us. I dismiss the stories that people would say that our country and America's best days are behind us, and I dismiss that. I truly feel like our best days are ahead of us, and I think I will be blessed to see them very many more years ahead of me, because I truly believe that I will live to see a lot of that, and I want people to know that they can have courage and not be just discouraged, to stop fighting along the way, and that Mason is trying to instill courage and a lack of fear to face our demons, might we might say. Either it's of the dark, or the boogeyman that lives under the bed, or just the people that uh, live within our own statutory governance. Those people are just humans. They put their pants on just like we do, and they have vulnerabilities just like we do. And it's not really ours to learn about their weakness, but it is ours to learn about our personal strengths, that we can stand firm and go forward to free others as well as ourselves along the way. Because when we free ourselves, we gain knowledge that we can share with others, and we don't have to do the work for them, but we can convince people to have courage to do the work themselves, that they might find uh, the strength to share their their stories with other people. So, I mean, I stand aside and just let the floor go to somebody else.
Couple of things to add to your beautiful rendition there, Low Tide. Uh, uh, the things that you will get to a point where you're experiencing are the little things about your daily walk that you have little problems with that may crop up. And I'm not talking about monstrous problems, okay? I'm talking about you may be working on a tying a piece of rope down to something to secure something, and all of a sudden you realize you're having all kinds of problem with this thing. The rope keeps breaking, or it's fraying, or the thing you're trying to hook it to just doesn't want to accept what you're doing, and all of a sudden this picture goes on. Okay, uh, and for me personally, see, I grew up in the aircraft industry, and we had programs that were called zero defects, which is one of the reasons the L-1011, which most people at this point in time don't even know about, but all the pilots that ever flew this plane, they knew that it was the best of the best. And I still, once in a while, I'll run into somebody in the military or whoever who knows about that plane. I say, yeah, it was the best, right? Yeah, well, let me tell you something. All the stuff that started happening in the late 70s, early 80s, where we were being inundated with substandard stuff from other countries. And I don't have to name a name, because I'm pretty sure that there probably isn't hardly anybody on the planet that doesn't at least point the finger one direction when they've had something to do with something they used to make things with or build stuff and all, and they know where it came from, and they have a problem with it. Well, here I am looking at this little project I'm working on, and all of a sudden, this picture of me having taken part in a program called Quick Fix. Now, most people are, what are you talking about? Well, there have been tanks of people who sat and were paid to figure out how to make a specific thing last a certain length of time before it broke. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what was going on. And I don't know if it's still going on, but I tell you what, I was looking at this situation I was having, and all of a sudden that little light went on and said, "Yeah, you were part of the quick fix crew at one point in your previous lifetime." And I'm like, "Oh
Hmm.
boy." And see, and I've had these starting with me when I was working for the aircraft company that I told you about, clear up until now, and I'm still dealing with this stuff. And it's like, oh my God. Okay, I got the picture. It took all that time for that little picture to come on. And when it did, I had to laugh because you're looking at yourself in a mirror. It's like, okay, be careful what you're complaining about, because there's something that you had some previous time with that you were directly responsible for. That's why you're having a problem with it now. There's
Yeah.
no end to the possible previous lifetimes that we've all experienced, especially if you're come to this time in your life in this particular time frame. So, be as the old saying goes, be happy in your work. And when you see something that's having a problem with you, just take a look into the mirror and laugh a little bit and be happy in your work.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
true. Well,
well, is that it? We don't have any other spiritually enlightened stories to hear? I can't imagine.
Well, I have just a couple of things, but they're not real big. But they're to me they were big at the time. Um, when I was a teenager, I was in college. I finally got to college, and um, I had a friend. We were roommates, and she decided that she wanted to move to Georgia. So she said, you can go too, and you can go to college in Georgia. You don't have to go here, in the area where I was. So I went with her, and I was driving around Georgia, and I saw signs and I saw places that they just seemed so familiar to me. And I had never been to Georgia before. So that was one thing, and that was earlier in my life. And then later in my life, I would lose things, and I just couldn't find something that I was looking for, and I would say, God, I know you know where that is. Why don't you just show it to me? I know you know it. And all of a sudden, it would just bing in my mind where to look, and darned if it wasn't there. So, I mean, these were just little things that have happened in my life. I haven't had any big things happen in my life, but there's a few little things that make me feel like, yeah, I'm growing spiritually. So, you know, I do agree that you can grow, and I'm looking forward to growing and growing and growing. So, somebody else go ahead and take over. Okay, am I the
well,
only one here now? Go ahead.
no, I don't have anything to say. I was just about to end the call.
Okay, that sounds good.
Um, is Salty? Do you have anything else you want to end the call with?
I don't have anything to say. Mason, do you have any closing words of wisdom?
uh, well, keep your eye out for the opportunity to take part in experience to help other people recognize they may have a job, an assignment dealing with the whole and in a particular ethnic area that they may be akin to. Because this is, like I said, this is an experience that had nothing to do with bringing us together. This whole thing was designed to break us all apart. And as long as we're all on the same planet, we're all moving towards the same frequencies and the same experiences in our spiritual life. It'd be kind of silly to try and point the finger at one person and tell them you don't qualify. So, this is another level of awakening. So until we can come up with another topic, I don't know how it could be any more opening or lightning than this one is, but who knows? We'll find out.
Salty, take it away. You have to end it.
Well, I appreciate everybody being here. We will see you Friday on the regular Constitution call, and we'll be posting that all over. This little recording, I'm thankful everybody joined us, and it will be it's recorded. We'll put it up on YouTube for the ones that might have missed it, or if you want to listen again. So I want to thank everybody again for being here, and y'all have a blessed Sunday afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.